This is a story of two disgraced people, a BBC tabloid journalist and his hired interview, a liar and self-admitted perjurer. Two men who have lost their status and will do anything to regain it. The story begins in March 2007, when BBC Panorama reporter John Sweeney and his producer, Sarah Mole, arrive at St. Hill Manor, once the home of Scientology's founder, L. Ron Hubbard. There they meet with Tommy Davis, the church's international spokesperson, to help in the development of their story. There to assist Mr. Davis is Mike Rinder, a former church executive removed 5 years earlier for a continued pattern of incompetence and gross malfeasance, who has now worked up to the position of junior assistant. With Rinder in tow, Mr. Davis tours Sweeney through St. Hill and offers to arrange full access for the BBC to the church's many buildings and facilities.
I could take you to Narcan Arrowhead, I could take you to Clearwater, I could take you to Los Angeles to our major churches there.
Sweeney promises to get back to him on the offer, but is hiding his true intentions. Because 4 days later, Sweeney pulls the first of many stunts. Suddenly turning up unannounced in Clearwater, Florida, home to Scientology's spiritual headquarters. That evening, when Scientologists gather in celebration of the birthday of their religion's founder, he appears with his cameras, demanding entry to interview the leader of the religion, who is at that moment on stage, speaking to a packed auditorium and a worldwide televised audience. This would not be the last of Sweeney's many tabloid stunts. The next day, he and his crew appear at an opening of a new Scientology church, where his behavior towards Tommy Davis would make his agenda crystal clear.
What happens if a Church of Scientology isn't a religion, but it's a sinister brainwashing cult? They say it's a sinister, mind-changing, brainwashing, money-grubbing cult. Your organisation is nasty.
And if there was still any doubt of Sweeney's agenda, it would soon be dispelled when he then uses a prominent church building as a backdrop to interview anti-Scientologist Sean Lonsdale, a convicted drug user and sex offender who had never been a Scientologist nor been inside a Scientology church. In fact, during his entire time in Clearwater, Sweeney himself never sets foot inside a Scientology church nor interviews a single Scientologist. But later in Los Angeles, when he finally interviews prominent Scientologists who can provide him with the truth about Scientology, his behavior is callous, insulting, and bullying.
What happens if it is a brainwashing cult? It's just a money-raising cult. Others say that it's just a PR stunt. It's mumbo-jumbo, that it's a rip-off. It tells people rubbish and it warps their mind. The reason you're saying this is that you've been, in some sense, brainwashed. You must be brainwashed. Is it possible that you might be brainwashed? If you were brainwashed, you would say that though, wouldn't you?
Do I look brainwashed to you? How dare you?
Despite this rude behavior, Tommy Davis gives a reluctant Sweeney and his crew a full tour of every church building at Scientology's main Los Angeles complex. But John Sweeney shows little interest and insists he is out of time. And instead of accepting Mr. Davis's offer to tour Golden Era Productions, the church's central audio-visual production facility, he declines. But the next day, he hires a helicopter and buzzes the property. Then he stages another stunt, landing nearby and driving his cameras to an unmanned security gate directly across from the main entrance, where he demands on-the-spot interviews with officials he knows are not there. This is just one of many stage stunts Sweeney would create for his cameras. In a San Francisco church, where he pretends to be ejected from the premises. In Los Angeles, where he bangs on a seldom-used fire door at the back of a church building, attempting to show he was being denied access. And in London, where he uses a movie premiere to harass film star John Travolta with his religious bigotry.
Some people say you're in a cult. Is Scientology a sinister cult? You've been brainwashed, Mr. Travolta. Take me to all
But it is during a private visit at the Citizens Commission on Human Rights, a watchdog group established by the Church of Scientology, that John Sweeney would become most notorious for an out-of-control and shameful psychotic rant directed at his host, the church's international spokesperson, Tommy Davis.
No, Tommy, you stop! No, listen to me! You were not there at the beginning of that interview! You were not there! You did not hear or record all the interview! Do you understand?
Brainwashing is a crime
Did you understand?
against humanity.
You are quoting the second half of the interview, not the first half! You cannot assert what you're saying!
Sweeney's meltdown garnered worldwide attention and over 1 million hits on YouTube. News stories mocking John Sweeney's behaviour appeared all over the media.
BBC journalist John Sweeney had been investigating the Church of Scientology when he snapped.
He was actually caught on tape ranting at a Church of Scientology official.
And his on-camera freakout has put him on YouTube and the BBC on the spot.
Exposing a journalist, a critic at his worst.
Sonia, you were not there! You were not there!
That's really the best way to get the most out of an interview, I'm sure.
Yeah,
really warm
little over the top, I think.
What was that?
Who could scream the loudest? Is that what you're saying?
It sounded like a seal. If you are interested in becoming a television journalist, his behavior was a fine example of what not to do.
The resulting controversy did more than embarrass the BBC. The elite body of British investigative reporters, the Frontline Club, labelled Sweeney persona non grata. Classes in 3 major universities used the example of John Sweeney to show what never to do in investigative journalism. One class counted in Sweeney's programme an astonishing total of 180 violations of BBC and government broadcast codes. John Sweeney became the poster child for shoddy reporting. And Sweeney's boss, Panorama editor Sandy Smith, was forced to make the unprecedented and humiliating move of sitting in front of his own cameras to explain himself.
What happened?
It's not songs of praise, is it?
No.
A laughingstock in journalistic circles, Sweeney desperately wants to excuse his indefensible behaviour to regain his former status and get revenge. And then there's Mike Rinder, disgraced within the church, unhappy with his resulting junior staff position, and resentful over Tommy Davis taking over his one-time job. That's him in the background, attending to whatever Mr. Davis needs. Shortly thereafter, without any warning, he vanishes, without a word, abandoning his religion, his family, and his wife of 35 years. Yet, inexplicably, soon afterwards, John Sweeney's producer, Sarah Mole, contacts him with an offer to talk to the BBC. At this point, Rinder seemingly declines. But Rinder's life does not go as planned. Because of his poor work ethic, he can't hold a job, and his life outside the church is a constant struggle. The next time Sarah Mole appears, he hopes his salvation is at hand, and she has brought someone else along, Marty Rathbun. Like Rinder, Rathbun is another former external affairs failure who had been removed from his position within the church for gross malfeasance. He had left the church suddenly and without warning in 2004. Rathbun is a suborner of perjury with a history of criminality. He is also a known drunk, most recently arrested and jailed in New Orleans, the most alcohol and bad behavior tolerant city in the entirety of the United States. And John Sweeney's Panorama producer Sarah Mole is happy to give them a public platform. Rinder has promised the BBC an exclusive. But what is he getting in return? And what does John Sweeney want? He wants Rinder to rewrite history. For in one of Rinder's only appearances in front of Sweeney's cameras in 2007, he told him that allegations by the BBC reporter against the church, and specifically its leader, were total lies.
Those allegations are absolute, utter rubbish. Absolute, utter rubbish.
The plan is simple: to recover his reputation, John Sweeney needs someone who will, with a straight face, pronounce to him on camera that Sweeney's infamous and shameful meltdown was, unbelievably, a brainwashing job performed on him by the church's spokesman, Tommy Davis. And who better to do this than Mr. Davis's former underling, the disaffected Mike Rinder? And who better to confirm Rinder's lies than his angry and vengeful, now best good buddy, Marty Rathbun? Rinder will tell Sweeney that he was lying in 2007 when he denied the allegations against the leader of his former religion. In short, Rinder gets a forum to attempt to destroy the man who replaced him and get revenge on church leaders. And Sweeney gets back his reputation. Is the BBC really allowing Sweeney to create a report exonerating himself for his own inexcusable psychotic rage? Apparently so. For on the 8th of December 2009, Sweeney's producer, Sarah Mole, sends an email to Tommy Davis informing him of the BBC's plans to launch a new show investigating certain vague and unspecified allegations against the Church of Scientology and its leader. That same day, the BBC also flies Sweeney's favorite two malcontents in from America, Marty Rathbun and Mike Rinder. They are accompanied by Rathbun's wife and one of Rinder's two girlfriends for a week of fun, frolic and interviews, an all-expenses-paid vacation worth over £7,000 billed directly to the BBC. 24 hours later, and indeed for several days after that, John Sweeney, his camera crew, and Rinder and Rathbun are found filming in front of several church properties, including a restored former office of Scientology founder L. Ron Hubbard. Although the location is only used for special tours, Sweeney repeatedly pounds on the front door, pretending the church won't allow him in, and ignoring a very conspicuous sign giving him a contact telephone number. To anyone viewing the security tape, it is yet another obvious tabloid stunt designed to make the church look like it won't give the BBC access, when in reality, the BBC hasn't even asked. Seeing this, church executives inform the BBC that, while they are more than willing to go on camera for the Panorama program, it is clearly not possible to work with a reporter with such a personal interest in bashing their religion. 2 months go by with no contact from the BBC. And then on the 17th of February, John Sweeney's new producer, Katie Stead, finally emails Tommy Davis in Los Angeles, listing Panorama's allegations and notifying him the church has 7 days to respond on camera before the Panorama team leaves the United States. That's right. John Sweeney and his crew were already there in Los Angeles, interviewing ex-Scientologists they had paid to fly in from all over the United States. There's Rathbun, Mike Rinder's full-time corroborator for Rinder's story. The first day Sweeney spends at the church's Los Angeles center, filming himself walking into various entrances and accosting church parishioners with anti-Scientology flyers.
I asked him to please not come into the church to do that. If he wants to invite people and pass out flyers, he's welcome to do so on the sidewalk. And he said, okay. And then the next thing I knew, he went in through to the other entrance. And I had to go and follow him and ask him please not to do that. So he goes, oh, all right. Then he went into our other church, the Advanced Saint Hill Organization of Los Angeles. And I walked in and I said, I asked you not to go into the church. He goes, oh, I didn't know it was your church.
But John Sweeney knew it was. That's him in the exact same place 3 years earlier during his tour of the church complex with Tommy Davis. The next day, in front of church locations around Los Angeles, Sweeney elicits for his cameras what carping criticisms he can from what few disgraced former members he can dredge up. One of them is Amy Scobie, dismissed years earlier from her junior staff position for incompetence, deceit, and serial sexual misconduct. She is just one of several women physically abused by Rinder, but has apparently forgiven all to help flog her self-published book. Sweeney takes this small band of detractors back, once again unannounced, to Golden Era Productions to stage more stunts and interviews. During this visit, he showers these anti-Scientologists with hugs and kisses, never once attempting to contact, let alone hug, any of the top church executives working right there. For while he is perfectly willing to interview any person critical of the church, including flying them at considerable expense across thousands of miles, he never speaks to a single Scientology executive, although they are working right inside the buildings he has been filming. But he is willing to fly another 2,000 miles himself to interview his prize defector, Mike Rinder. This is where Sweeney would stage many more stunts, including this one, interviewing Rinder in the exact same infamous rooftop location he had used for Sean Lonsdale 3 years earlier. There is where Rinder sells his soul to give the BBC what Sweeney so desperately wants, an excuse for his abhorrent and deranged meltdown. It's a deceitful act, but then again, this is the character of Mike Rinder, a man who had not only turned his back on his religion, he had abandoned his family as well. After his sudden departure from the church in 2007, Rinder's wife flies out to see Rinder after multiple failed efforts to reach him. Her purpose? To tell him in person that his son had contracted melanoma, an aggressive and disfiguring cancer. But Rinder refuses to talk to her. Multiple letters follow, begging him to answer and letting him know it is vitally important, but still no response. But when Rinder does receive the news about his son's illness, he never calls and never visits, not even when he moves to Florida and is living only 7 miles away. It isn't until the following April that Rinder suddenly becomes fearful that his callousness might prevent him from being seen as the reliable witness the BBC is supposedly paying for. So Rinder decides to pull a Sweeney-style stunt. Teaming up once again with Marty Rathbun, plus 2 others, he storms the Church of Scientology's main Clearwater religious retreat, with tape recorders rolling and cameras firing. In an acting job worthy of Olivier, Rinder demands to see his son. The police interview the young man inside and return, reporting to Rinder that his son does not want to see him and indeed wants nothing more to do with him. Any other father might have been hurt or offended, but any other father would not have brought along a 3-person camera team led by his pet bully, Marty Rathbun. Because the fact is, Rinder doesn't care about his son. He is only there, he admits, to get footage for the BBC.
Because now I actually have the evidence that I will take back to the BBC and show.
Is this a father who cares about his son? No. In an effort to reconcile their differences, Rinder's brother makes the 10,000-mile flight halfway around the world from Australia to Florida to join Rinder's estranged wife and his adult daughter, who fly in from Los Angeles. Once Rinder catches sight of his family, instead of welcoming them, he tells them he is on the phone with John Sweeney talking about them. Rinder turns a family intervention into a violent confrontation. He shoves his daughter away, injures his brother, and grabs hold of his wife's arms in a vice-like grip, causing lacerations that bleed so much an ambulance has to be called. His wife would later say, "Mike's hands were gripping my arms so tightly I could feel his fingers actually digging into my bones." Rinder's response to her cries of pain is unrepeatable. Doctors tell Rinder's wife that the damage to the nerves in her right arm will take months to heal. Rinder's response to this violent incident with his family? To call up a local tabloid and spin a wild tale, casting himself as the victim and claiming that he has no idea how his wife sustained her injuries. That is Mike Rinder, an incompetent, a liar, and an abuser of women. And his partnership with John Sweeney is one of mutual personal gain, with no concern for fairness or the truth. For during both Sweeney's 2007 program and the filming of his program in 2010, he repeatedly violates both BBC broadcast guidelines and British Office of Communication codes by which all BBC journalists, even John Sweeney, are bound. Such as Ofcom Broadcasting Code Section 8.11, staging ambush interviews on unsuspecting victims, or doorstepping. BBC Guidelines Section 3, inventing purely fictitious stunts. BBC Guidelines Section 4, fraternizing with church detractors while consistently treating Scientologists with contempt. Ofcom Broadcasting Code Section 4.2, engaging in religious bigotry. And the list goes on. BBC Guidelines Section 3, Ofcom Broadcasting Code Section 5.1, Ofcom Broadcasting Code Section 5.7, Ofcom Broadcasting Code Section 5.8, and on and on. In more than 50 letters, the Church and its solicitors have brought these violations to the attention of Panorama, as well as the executive levels of the BBC, all of which have been disregarded. The BBC has also failed to respond to requests for specifics behind any of the allegations they have made, but have chosen instead to endorse Sweeney in his attempt to cobble together a story bereft of facts. And helping Sweeney to fabricate this story are the likes of Mike Rinder and his corroborator, Marty Rathbun. For who are these people really? Desperate wrecks of men, relying on each other to salvage their reputations, ready and willing to do and say anything to regain the stature and influence they once enjoyed. Is this how the public wants the BBC to spend their license fees? On the personal agendas of a disgraced tabloid journalist and a self-described posse of vindictive liars? The answer, of course, is no.